I'm Ashley Brundage, and I'm an out boss, and I'm super thrilled to be here today.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. On today's episode, I'm super thrilled to introduce Ashley Brundage to you all, a friend and just an all-star, rock star human being. So Ashley, welcome to the show. It's so nice having you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be a part of your out entrepreneurs and to join so many amazing out bosses before me.
Yes. Awesome. So if you are not familiar with Ashley's work, she is the founder and president of Empowering Differences. While overcoming homelessness, she began employment at a major financial institution as a part-time teller who ascended the ranks to become a national vice president for diversity and inclusion in less than 5 years. Through her book and training company, she highlights the 10 key empowering actions that she used to leverage change for her career and community. Since beginning gender transition in 2008, Ashley has worked tirelessly to promote awareness and acceptance of transgender and nonbinary people. She serves on GLAAD's National Board of Directors and the NGLCC's Corporate Advisory Council and their Trans Plus Inclusion Task Force. Today, we'll discuss Ashley's first book, Empowering Differences, to discuss how our personal struggles may just be the key we've been looking for to unleash our life's purpose. Oh my gosh, this is going to be an awesome episode. So first, congratulations on getting the book done. I know that that's a huge accomplishment. So yay, we're celebrating successes.
I'm going to virtually wipe my forehead of excitement for making it.
I love it. So one word, like now that you're here on this side of the book writing process, what's that feeling? What's that one word that
it's empowering? I mean, obviously to be kind of a little bit, I took that, it was low bait. I had to take it. But it's so empowering. It's like I've seized the power of control. I've given power and authority to myself and others now by giving and amplifying my voice.
Yeah,
it's powerful and empowering at the same time.
I love it. Totally on brand too. So let's start with the journey, right? So all of those lived experiences, a few that were shared just in that bio that I read, that led to writing your first book, Empowering Differences. So why did you write it? And what's the book's like? What is the main goal that you want readers to take away after reviewing it?
So I really feel it's like a cross between career development, because that's the underlying principle of what inspired me to ultimately write this book in this manner, combined with the motivational and inspirational journey of overcoming those kinds of obstacles that we all face, regardless of our diversity or our differences, as I use the term, empowering differences. Everything that's about you that could be different from the person that's next to you can be used as leverage to help you in your journey of empowerment. And some of these things like don't necessarily even have to be those social structural things that we see immediately when we look at someone or we hear them talk. It can be things beneath the iceberg that are about you, that make up who you are, your lived experiences, the languages you speak, the countries you visited, your hair color, like literally all the things that are about you, that make you unique, that make you you, can be empowered and can be the recipe to help you move forward in your career. And that's the ultimate goal in creating this book and really helping people in that manner.
I love that. And you're speaking my language, and definitely for many people who tune into the show, we're like, yes, we're on board. So, I want to speak to one piece, which is, your background is coming from corporate America, which historically, not every company, but historically it has embraced old notions of command and control leadership and conformity, right? So in your book, you talk about embracing our individual differences, the things that make us stand out. Yeah, in a corporate environment, many, some folks who are tuning in right now who are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, many of us are discouraged from talking about those differences, so let alone embracing them. How do we make this shift to embracing what makes us different and use these differences to ascend the career ranks in a similar way that you did in your own experiences in corporate America?
Yeah, I think that everyone will have their own key empowering actions. For me, it was really understanding and leveraging my 10 key empowering actions that I put forth in the book that really made the biggest impact for me in this journey of both being an entrepreneur, but also growing growing as an employee in an organization. The path is the same. Like the principles are the same, regardless of whether it's your own company or you're working for someone else's company. And oftentimes, I know, especially in this current economic point, you have to do both in many cases. We all have a side hustle or we all have other responsibilities and we wear multiple hats. And how you communicate and how you leverage your differences is impacted in both spaces.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah. And I like that you said, like you're sharing what worked for you, and that I think your readers, I haven't read the book yet. I'm excited to, but I think the readers will see some of those actions and they may look different in how they've shown up in their own career. And yet, that's the connecting place. And hopefully, like there's that inspiration too of like, hey, there might be other actions that you've taken too. So consider those as well, right? It's kind of a
both. Well, and interestingly enough, I picked 10 key empowering actions, right? Because it just has a fun ring to it. But like, I want to say it's like the last sentence in my book is I say, of course, as you've now finished this book, there were a whole lot more than 10 actions that I talk about throughout this entire book. But I want you to really focus on the key ones that are important in your journey, because everyone's journey will be a little bit different. And that's why you have to empower your own way.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful. And, one of the things I admire most about your career transformation is how you started a business. You talked about the side hustle. So you started a business while also keeping your current position, right? And your business is based on largely like the content, like the backbone of the business is the content of the book. So what advice might you have for our audience on how becoming an author can either start up a business idea and or enhance the current business that they might be leading right now?
Yeah, I have some really good takeaways. Many of them are found in my book, but I will give you a little peek. And one of the uncovering and recognizing mistakes that you make along the way. The biggest one I'll tell you in this model of wearing multiple hats is being able to separate your identities and understand your own brand versus the company that you may work for versus the company ultimately that you want to create. And I'll tell you that how you promote yourself on social media, how you leverage your contacts, how you grow your database and network are all extremely key in this mission of growing and cultivating your own business while still earning a paycheck, but also really still being able to commit to whatever your responsibilities are. When you raise your hand and you own a project, you have to deliver. Every time you have to over-deliver and under-promise, over-deliver, right? These are those constant principles that will do you really well in business as you're moving in your career and you're moving for your business. But really manage your brand identity from the start. I wish I could have taken it into a time machine back earlier on and managed that a little bit better. And I had to play catch up in some ways to be able to kind of separate church and state so much, honestly, for lack of a better analogy. I think that that's really something to look at when you're going down this path of recognizing and growing yourself as an entrepreneur.
So on that point, I think that's really helpful on just kind of the distinctions you made about your brand, the company that you work for's brand, and in your case, the company that you're trying to build that brand, right?
Three brands, right?
Yes,
three
under one.
triple, right?
There's going to be a lot of work when you.
And then if you for any sakes, right, if you also volunteer in the community like many of us do, right, you also have the brand of the organization that you partner with in the community too, because I'm certain that you're probably on someone's board, right, or serving on a committee somewhere, so you have that brand as well. And it's like these brand identities and managing them all.
Yeah. So it's a lot, right? It's a lot to kind of think about the different hats that you wear and what's most appropriate when. So kind of rewinding, going back to your younger self, you said that you wished like you kind of knew what you know now then. If you could talk to younger Ashley, what would you say, just getting started on, maybe that first year at that kind of major financial institution where you worked, right? Like what would be that thing that you would say to her around, like these are some things to keep in mind that's going to really help you in building your brand?
I think that I would have really just kind of wanted to make sure that I was really aware of all the moves that I was making and just really keep track of all of those sponsors. A lot of what I talk about in the book, there's a whole huge reference, right? One of my 7 key empowering actions is mentorship. All of the people that you really connect with and build the relationship, like you get them to be a mentor, right? That's fantastic. You need to take mentorship even further, and you need to also make sure that everybody that you're interacting with can be a sponsor. It took me a little while to realize that, and I wish I would have probably about had a year back into cultivating sponsors. I think the person who cultivates the most sponsors at the end of the day is the one that wins the race. Because when you think about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, and this works for all of your out entrepreneurs, your out bosses, right? Be thinking about how many sponsors you can get for you and your brand and your company, right? Because those sponsors are going to be the ones that'll immediately write you a review on Amazon. They're the ones that are going to immediately be able to amplify your message and share your idea with the entire board of directors of a major corporation. And think about the time commitment, right? When you think about the time commitment and the difference between being a mentor and being a sponsor, it's a huge ask to be someone's mentor. And let's think about this. In this environment, asking for a whole lot of time on a recurring basis is a huge ask. So please be mindful of that and understand that asking someone to be a sponsor is also like very tricky. And I talk a lot about this in the book around navigating sponsors and how to cultivate them. So you'll get a lot of those pieces out of the book. But just one key takeaway here that I'll give you as a teaser is remember that when you are looking for someone to be a sponsor, take something off their plate. Like if you take something off their plate as the kind of people who you are looking to be a sponsor of you and you help you grow your business, if you take something off their plate, they're going to be that much more excited to be able to say, oh, wow, Ashley helped me do this. It was so amazing. I didn't even ask. It made such a huge impact for me and the company or my company or the organization. And that's going to be an immediate way where they're going to be wanting to hunt out ways to help you.
So I have a couple questions for you that just to follow up to make sure that for audience members that may not be kind of as immersed in diversity, equity, and inclusion, just to kind of understand some of these, the nomenclature that we're using. So from your definition of mentorship versus sponsorship, what's the difference between the two of those things?
So let me think about this here for 1 second. When we have to separate these two, right? There's a lot of work that goes to this. Okay. Now I'll tell you that the first one, right? So mentoring is actually literally connecting and partnering with someone and helping them in their mission. And that could be a business, it could be a person. To be a mentor, it requires your action to be present. Now, whether that's virtually or in person, right? You have to have some sort of cadence. You can give a one-time mentorship with someone and you can look to people to be mentors of you based on their actions. Now, sometimes that can happen without actually having a connection with someone as well. There's lots of different ways that individuals can mentor, but usually when you're navigating in the world of mentorship, you're going to have something specific, measurable, actionable, time related, right? And it's going to be smart, right? And it's going to be realistic as well. And that's usually what's going to happen in that mentorship lane. And then for sponsors, it's a whole different world, right? Sponsorship really exists in that way of amplifying and building up others. It's like ways in which you can amplify the message of transgender inclusion. You know, the trans community, we're such a small percentage of the population. So we require a lot of cis allies to be sponsors for us and to help move trans inclusion forward in a lot of cisgender environments. And so that's a, real world example of how sponsors are really important in this mission. And obviously, like, amplification in its own right is where you're taking someone's voice and then you're pushing it out. So that could literally be something as simple as a retweet, or something as more impactful as, literally introducing you to a leader at a major corporation and giving a testimonial. It's a one-time action potentially, and then they're done. So it's a lot easier of an ask, but you really have to cultivate that relationship with someone to really get them to be a sponsor. And a lot of actions go into that cultivating. So
that's awesome. And so you had mentioned also, like, one of the ways to kind of get that amplification from a sponsor is taking something off of their plate. And what might be an example of something that you did for someone who has been just a champion of making sure that you're in front of the right people and that people are aware of the work that you're doing in the world?
Yeah, I actually have a really fun example. The regional bank president where I live, who's a very influential person, been around the organization for more than 20 years, knows everyone in the organization, all the way to the CEO. These are the kinds of people that you really want as sponsors. Not that you don't want just a general person to be a sponsor of you, because individuals can make an impact, but you really want to have those key leaders in the organization to be sponsors. And I found out that we were actually building a playground in the community where I live, and that we needed volunteers to show up to help this playground build happen. And so in the end result, we didn't have a whole lot of team members who had signed up to build the playground. So I said, you know what, I got this. I'll go ahead and bring one of my nonprofit organizations that I partner with. We'll do it as a community event with the nonprofit organization, and I'll get all the volunteers that we need. I'll take care of it. I'll own it. And like 2 weeks later, the event happened. At the event, I had all the people in the organization that I volunteer for all wearing the same shirts. And the regional president comes up to me and says, "Ashley, who are all these people wearing these shirts with this name of this organization there?" And I said, "Oh yeah, that's my group." So I ended up doubling the amount of people that we had at the playground build, and we were able to successfully build the playground. And at the end of the day, he was one of my key contributors to my career development, amplifying for me in ways that I never would have imagined, helping to get the position, literally the position that I ascended to, get created. He was a champion in that whole process because of doing that. And I helped in a lot of other ways too, but you really have to be intentional in how you're going to cultivate a relationship with a sponsor. Cultivating the relationship is the key to empowering your differences.
Yes. Okay, so going to empowering your differences, and thank you for those examples. I think that's super helpful. So you had also mentioned that for yourself, for folks, you are serving as a mentor, you're serving as a sponsor. And in thinking about empowering differences, right? Like we know that it's really impactful to make sure that we're sponsoring people that don't remind us of our younger selves, in ways. So like thinking about our audience, right? Like we have amazing out entrepreneurs from lots of different social identities and backgrounds, right? So what's some advice so that we can make sure that we're dropping down the ladder for folks that maybe historically underestimated, undervalued, may not have immediately the opportunities that we would love for everyone in the world to have the opportunities they need to do their best work and to be doing the things that they want to do in the world. So any ideas that come to mind?
We really have to be intentional to showcase inclusion of others. We have to reach beyond the lines. We have to reach upon racial lines. We have to reach upon the lines of all the other letters for the LGBTQ plus. And we have to learn, right? We have to learn about other identities that are out there. The last 2 years, I've invested a lot to learn about non-binary and gender nonconforming. And in fact, we rebranded the NGLCC trans task force to be the trans and gender nonconforming task force, TGNC, because we needed to learn. Trans people needed to learn to be better of people who were considered a part of our umbrella. I've partnered with my company with other LGBTBEs. I think that that's also really important of ways that you can showcase that allyship for others in our community. I've passed on training contracts to trans women of color. They need the most support. If someone were to take my exact lens of trying to start as a part-time teller, but then add in more intersectionality and add in not the racial privilege that I own as a white person, would I have had the same career arc in less than 5 years? I don't know. I mean, I'd like to say that I would have, that all of those still dominoes would have fallen their way, but knowing how our world operates, it probably wouldn't have. And I recognize that. And everyone listening on today needs to recognize the privileges that you have. Because you're listening to this podcast, you have privilege. That means you have internet. That means you have the ability to access the platform. It means you can actually hear it. It means that, think about all the accessibility that goes with that. So we really have to do a privilege check instead of doing a mic check on a day-to-day basis. This is a big part into empowering differences. And actually, this is one of the reasons why I built the workbook that goes with empowering differences, because the workbook has the self-assessment. And the self-assessment is designed to really help you think about what privileges and disprivileges you have in society and how best to leverage them. Because the fundamental concept of empowering differences is taking your biggest perceived weakness and then using it as your biggest strength in your career mission or your business mission. And to do that, you have to be honest and you have to be empowering.
That's both a mic and privilege drop right there. So that's awesome. I think that's so.
Wait. So we're done now?
Yeah, no,
just kidding. Don't leave. We still want you to keep listening.
Yes. No, we're gonna have more of those. So for sure, I think that's all. Really, really important for our listeners, in particular, just on the piece around accessibility, and thinking about really looking in at where we hold privilege, where we hold advantages. Even being members of the LGBTQ community, right? Like we're not a monolith, right? And while there may be disadvantages around our sexual orientation or our gender identity, where do we hold privilege where we can use some of that power to, again, like drop the ladder down? Who within our communities are still historically underestimated, right? And how do we change that? And that's part of our work as leaders. So I really, thank you for speaking truth to that. Sometimes that's not easy to hear for folks tuning in, and it's also a challenge, right? And we're entrepreneurs; we like challenges. So
yeah, we're like ready to rock, right? Yeah. Ready to seize the moment.
yes, we're thoughtful, and I think really willing to tackle challenges that haven't been solved yet. And so I think this is one of the challenges for us. And I think many of us are doing it, and you provide a lot of great examples in your book. So I want to pivot to your process of book writing, right? Because there are folks who are tuning in right now who have a book in them, who are thinking about sharing their knowledge and wisdom with the world. So when you think about your creative process and what it took to download your wisdom and put it in the book, are you someone who speaks and then writes, like by talking out your ideas, then it becomes clear and you're like, this is what I'm going to write? Or is it kind of the reverse? Are you someone who needs to write and kind of play around with text on page before you bring it out on a stage?
So I would probably say that I'm a combination of all of those.
Yeah, both
because
ends.
I'm like my own like unique flower that has bloomed into this amazing writer. And I knew I had a book in me, right? And as I know many of you that are listening today have a book in you. And it was a process. It was not easy for me because I did not go to college. So I have that as a disprivilege. But I really worked to start cementing ideas. And honestly, technology really was a huge help in this process. I created the Google Docs on my phone and giving a shout out to a major corporation. So I hope they're happy about that. And then I used the voice dictate button, and I just recorded the words onto those pages around the topics. And then as I started to farm them out more, I knew what I had. And then I actually worked with a developmental editor, a really good friend of mine who is working on getting her business certified as an LGBTBE trans entrepreneur, another trans entrepreneur, Brandy Lai from Best Laid Pens.
Yes, Brandy's amazing. Yes.
She was a huge help in this process for me to getting this from idea to concept to a bunch of words and a bunch of pages with professional development editing was exactly what I needed to get this over the finish line. And then just that process to go after that. And then that's when we really actually outlined to get, like with her help, we realized what we had, and we had 4 parts to empowering differences. And so part 1 is knowing yourself, and then part 2 is knowing others. Part 3 is developing your strategy for empowering differences, and then part 4 is the empowering actions. And then we kind of knew where the whole book and how it was going to lay out, how it would flow, and that was with her helped get me over that hump. And yeah, I'm like so excited about that and thrilled for you all to read it. It's going to really, hopefully, really change a lot of people's ideation around diversity, equity, inclusion, but really the overarching concept of what empowering differences is ultimately about really stems to one foundational concept. And I'm wondering, this is like pop quiz, but do you have a guess on what that foundational concept really is?
I would say it's our superpowers, right? Like what you said. Like what is the thing? Yeah, go for it.
Superpower, but really leadership, right? I mean, honestly, really leadership is that foundational item that ties all of this together, right? I mean, you can't have empowerment without leadership. You can't have inclusion without leadership. Leaders, and you all listening today, you all are displaying leadership skills every day. It's just about figuring out how to put them into ways to empower yourself and others.
Yes, I love it. And it's so I also really appreciated that support that you had around using Google Docs and the transcribing feature, right? So you're speaking in your own voice the ideas that you want to include in the book, right? And just, you might be out for a walk or you're driving your car or whatever you're doing, it's just like boom, you downloaded an idea. And rather than kind of, sometimes people think when writing a book, it's like I have to be at the desk every day from 5 to whenever and just pound out on the keys those ideas. Sometimes when you're speaking in your own voice, like that's, you are empowering your differences and your ideas and your process to get the ideas on the page. So, if you're listening and you're thinking about that process yourself and kind of overwhelmed with it, of where you start, just download, if it's Google or there's Otter, that's one of those great kind of transcribing features where you're just on the run and you can get those ideas down.
Even
And
just text it to yourself. I mean, like,
yeah,
it seems kind of silly that we would, not use the technology as an advantage. And interesting, we were talking about accessibility earlier, right? And the whole idea of text message and voice dictate was all built on accessibility years and years ago. So it's just interesting how the diverse communities all are the hot breeding bread for all the great incubator ideas that move forward.
Yeah.
It's just interesting how we're all stronger together. Like literally we are stronger together.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. That's where the innovation comes from, is when you get heterogeneous teams that don't all look the same, and people are safe enough to share their ideas. They trust each other, even if they kind of bumble through some failures. Like once you get that out of the way, that's where the really cool ideas come from. So I really appreciate that. So I wanted to go into the second piece, which complementing your writing, complementing your books, you're also doing keynote speaking. And so for folks in the audience who are members of the LGBTQ community, have really dynamic stories that can really move other people once we share our stories. Like, what advice do you have to get people past maybe their fear of public speaking to get up on the stage and share some things, share some transformative moments in their own lives that can motivate people to do things a little bit differently?
I'll tell you that my biggest, I was totally petrified to be a speaker years and years ago before transitioning openly. It was actually never even the thought never ever entered my mind. I didn't volunteer in the community. I was scared, scared of my own shadow, but rightfully so, because I was battling all the gender identity. But after that point, and I started to realize, oh, wow, this is good. I'm okay. And I got comfortable with myself. So you have to build your confidence in this. You can't go up tomorrow and just start speaking, but really record yourself. Go in your own Zoom meeting or wherever online and just join it yourself, and then record and watch yourself talk to the group of people. That's the best impactful way that you can really hear what you're saying and make sure that you're resonating, and that will help you to recognize and other things that you might keep saying over and over again, those repeating words. And obviously there's Toastmasters and things like that exist out there that can help you in that methodology. I actually benefited from a grant and a community-driven sponsorship from a sponsor through the Gill Foundation. Mm-hmm. And the Gill Foundation hosted a media training workshop for transgender leaders in Florida through Equality Florida.
Yeah.
And that was a huge investment in my professional development as a speaker. They brought in Sally Cohn from CNN, because often contributor, and she grilled us. And it was really done as a prep stage for trans leaders to be better armed to speak to the media amongst the midst of all these bathroom bills and anti-LGBTQ legislation that was being put forth. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so sometimes you have to come outside your comfort zone a little bit, and being recorded. Just think about the world that we live in. Everyone has a cell phone, and everyone, if you can go any country in the world, the most remote area, and every single person will have a video recording device at their disposal. So just remember that that's this world that we live in. What you're saying is always going to be recorded. I mean, it's overwhelming sometimes to think that way. But if you plan every day that somebody is going to potentially be recording you, you're going to be always game on, ready, right? Ready to rock, ready to own it, ready to be out. You're going to be ready to just be an out boss all day.
Totally. I think that's so key. Like a couple of things that you shared. One, just practice the art. It really is an art that if you are speaking, if you're able to speak, if you're able to share your voice with other people, you've been perfecting this craft for a while. You share stories, and it's thinking more about how do we become more effective communicators, because we we all have something very important to share. You started a business for a reason. If you're listening to the show, there's a reason, a purpose behind it. So how do you articulate that better? How do you get out in front of a group of people and really share your why, share why you do it every day?
And this helps you with your pitch skills for your business.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll add one more key takeaway here, just as an extra added dessert item.
Yes, let's do it.
Is I love it when people present in threes. So if you don't think about that when you're doing a pitch or you're doing a TED Talk or you're doing a keynote, you should have 3 fundamental concepts every time you present to someone. Mm-hmm. And so when I do a Empowering Differences keynote, I pick 3 of my empowering actions. And those are the 3 that I focus on. And I pivot back to them constantly. And that way it's comfortable. Those are the 3 concepts that I know really well. You're only going to be a really good speaker when it's something that you really know. When you read from a teleprompter or you read from a notebook or you read from a script, people can tell. You're not kidding anyone. No matter how many times you practice it and rehearse it, people will know. They're going to see where your eyes are on the screen. If it's a webinar, they're going to know. Okay, so it has to come from the heart. Good speakers really captivate the audience from the heart. You have to have equal parts strength and equal parts warmth to really be able to connect with your audience.
So some free guidance here on how to be more effective with your message and your why and what you want to share. So a couple more questions for you, and then we're gonna wind down our interview. So Ashley, I want to know, one, since this conversation is about empowering differences, when you think about being a part of our rainbow family, as amazing as it is, from your own lived experiences, what is your superpower? If you had to name one, I know that you probably name a bunch in your book, but like if you had to choose one, what is that superpower that you hold that is a rainbow superpower in which it allows you to stand out in your business?
My biggest rainbow superpower is probably my honesty and just being able to be true and live true, which, honesty leads to so many other things. It leads to integrity. It leads to inclusion. It leads to connects to a lot of things. But my ability to really be honest with myself and honest with others, I think is probably my rainbow superpower.
I love it. I love it. And it allows you to speak truth to power when you are clear with who you are. And as a leader, since leadership is kind of the thing that ties, it's that kind of through line throughout your book. That self-awareness piece is so huge, like knowing who you are and leading from that truth. And I think it's something that many of us in the Rainbow family, right, that we can identify, like when we share an aspect of who we are, it sometimes can be very vulnerable if we're not sure how that will be received. Yet if we're taking a step towards someone with our vulnerability, it's amazing. Not always, for sure. I'm sure many of us have stories when it's not always the case, right? But
right.
When you are pleasantly surprised when you step forward to someone when you don't know, and then they take a step closer to you too, that's powerful. I don't know. I feel like kind of, yeah.
But it's interesting that honestly, there we go. Honestly, that's why part 1 is right. Knowing yourself. If you like literally empowering differences is not possible for you to empower differences in your business, in your career, in yourself, if you don't know yourself.
Yeah.
Have to know yourself. There's some quotes out there from famous people, right? How the hell are you going to help somebody else if you can't help yourself, right? I'm certain that there's a little bit more of another way that person says that quote. But from the out bosses, I know you know who I'm talking about. He gets a lot of flack in the trans community lately from some anti-trans comments, but the quote is powerful in its own way.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I want to close with a question, knowing
we're leaving, really? Oh,
yes, just for now.
Yeah, but hang on, right? Hang on, listener.
A little bit left. So I would love for you to kind of like step into move into kind of the worldview of folks tuning in right now who they haven't written a book yet. They're not up on stage. They haven't even started with their business idea yet. So what advice do you have for folks who are just thinking about taking that move towards being an LGBTQ entrepreneur? What would be your advice to those folks?
So to take that entrepreneurial leap, I would definitely say to connect with the foundational concept of empowering differences. It will really help you to move forward in your spirit. And I've also built a really amazing online leadership development course, the 10 Empowering Actions to Leverage Change. It will be a game changer in your journey. It was designed with you in mind to help you really connect to the principles that we've talked about here today.
Excellent. So empoweringdifferences.com, we've got that. We've got the link in the show notes. So I highly, highly encourage our listeners to check that out. It is so relevant to us being a part of the LGBTQ plus communities, many communities within our Rainbow family. And just please support Ashley and the incredible work that she's doing. So Ashley, thank you so much for being on the show. It was such a pleasure having you here today.
Oh my goodness, I was so excited and honored to be here and participate with you, and a big shout out to all of you outbosses for listening.
Yes, I love it. So outbosses, thank you for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Ashley. Details from today's conversation can be found at outentrepreneur.com. And remember, new episodes of the show are available every Tuesday morning. So for now, I would love for you to keep showing up as authentically as you want at work, in life, everywhere. And we'll talk again next Tuesday.